Okay, 30 seconds. Starting at Bill, working this way. Everybody introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Bill Hartnett. You know, I just want to say I hate. Where did you get that picture? That's a picture of me running in a race, and I'm about 50 pounds heavier in that picture, and I look like my head's going to explode. Bill Hartnett, longtime producer, creative director, marketer. Currently work at AMC Networks doing trailers and promos for shows.
And in my defense, I tried to find pictures of everybody looking at me. So you're all looking at the same direction. And yes, you're running, but you're probably the least photographed person on the internet I've ever met in my life. So you got to get a little bit more, Bill. We'll have a bunch of pictures of you from today. We can swap it out. Okay, Ian, you're next.
Okay, and I'll skip the picture protest, but I hate that picture too. So when Saul went down the list of one of these, one of those, I'm the big agency guy. Although I've also worked for small agencies. I've been working for agencies my entire adult life, and I recently left Publicis after 12 years. Spent time at Deutsch, spent time at TBWA, Rap, others. And I've sort of had every job you can have in an agency, from account guy to president to chief creative officer and chief strategy officer. So yeah, I've been around the block a few times.
Well, hi. I'm Paul Thorogood. I have no problems with my picture right now. I think it's quite whimsical. I remember the day it was taken. I'm a product designer by trade, industrial design, whatever you want to say. Worked my way up through companies like Moo and joined the startup industry, and then ended up in Silicon Valley and now back in New York. I've worked for probably some of the youngest companies in the country, but also probably some of the oldest, as I came to work for Crane Stationery, a 218-plus-year-old brand, where I got to hold things like Paul Revere's notes and things like that. So that was spectacular, and it's been a journey, and I've done lots of different things in terms of being creative director and managing product departments. And now I've decided to have a baby and try and build a company. Nothing small.
If you guys didn't notice from Paul's accent, he's from Florida.
Hello. Now that we're on the picture thing, I have no clue where you got that photo either.
I got no that clue. From, I just followed you around for a couple weeks.
Funny and creepy. No, Jesse Frampton, no ad agencies, no marketing experience, one of those entrepreneurial fake it till you make it. I co-founded a company called Fuzz Wax Bar in 2012. We are currently only in Canada with 20 locations, but very excited to be branching into the US this year. So yeah, franchise concept, business brain, no agency or ad, kind of just doing my thing. Yeah. I think we have to share this guy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, I'm Megan Peters. I recently joined Saul's company, the Idea Integration Company, and prior to that, I was a VP of Consumer Marketing at the Wall Street Journal, and before that, I was at Facebook for 8 years. To Saul's point about everyone on the panel being a little bit different, I have an MBA and I think a very traditional career path that has been creative in its own way. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that and what that looks like for me and everybody else today. Thanks.
Cool. Before anybody says anything, can we just get a huge round of applause? And can you keep it going for 90 minutes? Okay, let's get started. I have questions specifically for each of you, but let's just start with a free-for-all. You guys can all jump in. You can all answer. You don't have to all answer, whatever you're comfortable with. But, as we head into a recession, where do creative people kind of live? And is creativity even valued in this sort of, this new reality that we're entering? I can answer if you guys don't.
I think we're at a very important time in history, and I like to go back through projects when I'm working and kind of look at history and delve into things to kind of bring things back and forward. And if you look at it with the internet and what's happening with the recession, and you go back to, say, the early 1900s, like 1920s and things like that, you can see a change. Like, we're going through a new kind of industrial revolution. And creativity is part of that industrial revolution, because like you're seeing the emergence of the creator economy from the influencer economy and things like that, and that's going to become more and more powerful, not just for brands but for individual people. And the statistics that you said earlier on in terms of like the people registering new companies, that's about creativity. That's about people creating new spaces for them to work in. But technology is also giving us those spaces as a reaction to that. It's more opportunity. And people are thinking that they can go out and do things, and brands are hooking onto that, and people are hooking onto that. So I think it's very important. I think we're at an interesting time, even though it's kind of scary, about how creativity can kind of impact the world and actually help it.
I think the weird paradox is so many companies that sort of make their money off of creativity, the first people to go are creative people. You know, the sales guys and the finance guys, they're usually pretty safe because the money. But it's really tricky because, you know, I've been fired and laid off a few times, and it always takes a little bit longer for me to find a job because I don't really do anything. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, if you're a sales guy, you're like, I'm a sales guy, you know, but like, I don't want to do the exact same thing that I did before. So it's always tricky to find that next gig. So yeah, it is a scary time, and hopefully, you know, but I think that you're right. I think that creativity right now is incredibly valuable, and I think it hopefully transfers, you know, when you're trying to find, or when they're looking at like, who are we going to kill to, you know, save the bottom line. It's like, well, let's keep a couple of the creative guys.
Well, it's funny. It's like the CMO position is the least or the most volatile position in any organization, because you can't get rid of the CEO because that'll tank your stock. You can't get rid of your CFO because that'll tank your stock. So let's just get rid of the marketing guy. They're a dime a dozen. And I read somewhere recently that the average lifespan of a CMO at a big brand is, I think, 12 to 15 months, which is crazy. But if you can get a job as a CMO in a giant company, when they do fire you, they write a giant check for you to go away. So I highly recommend it if you can get it, and stuff like that. But I agree with both of you, and you know, it's funny. You know, I think it was Paul. I'm only half paying attention. I think it was Paul who said, you know, the creator economy is really coming out of the influencer economy. The creator economy actually has value, where the influencer economy, nothing against influencers, you know, it's incredible. These people have been able to, you know, turn just popularity into like a career. But creator economy is actually something that is far more monetizable, because it doesn't rely on popularity. It relies really on, you know, your ability to create something that somebody wants to buy, as opposed to, I'm not selling a Instagram post of me holding your can of soup. I'm actually creating a guide, or I'm creating something that has like far more lifetime value to it. And, you know, you talk about passive income and all that stuff that was, you know, all the buzzwords from 10 years ago. But, you know, I'm excited for the creator economy to kill the influencer economy, because finally someone like me, who's only half attractive, can make some money on the internet again. So let me ask you guys a question. And this is kind of directed at you, Ian, because I know it's your sweet spot. But again, this is a free-for-all question where I'd love a bunch of different things. But, you know, and I started off talking about influencers and stuff like that. But another buzzword, you know, sort of pre-pandemic, was storytelling. And, you know, you saw job titles with the word storytelling in it. And you know, all of a sudden, I'm not going to name any names. I'm like a pretty, you know, jaded and bitter person with a black heart. So I see everything on the internet, and I could tell you every consultant that just changes their title based on whatever's cool at the moment. All of a sudden, I'm the chief Clubhouse person or whatever. But there was a lot of people who really went all in on storytelling, and now it's like it's funny, you don't hear a lot about storytelling, but like prostitution, storytelling has been around forever. and it's just like, it's, you know, sometimes we talk about it and sometimes we don't. Like, where does storytelling kind of live right now, and how does it work with prostitution?
Moving on from prostitution, although I have spent my whole life working for big agencies, so storytelling is, it became an overused word very quickly. And everybody was a storyteller, and you weren't a marketer anymore because that wasn't cool. You were a storyteller. And it got so overused and misunderstood that everyone stopped using it. And storytelling's about to really have its day because it might sound weird for an ad guy to say this, but advertising is not going to be anything like you remember it. It's changing so rapidly. We actually start to use the phrase post-advertising to talk about what we do now, because it's all about crafting experiences, and the consumer gets a say in everything, and even data, which has the power to manipulate and be evil and have this menacing presence that follows us around. You know what? Data also is an opportunity to unlock empathy, because if I'm in a one-on-one conversation with you, as I learn things about you, I'm going to respond and react to that in a way, hopefully, that has meaning and value to you. And that is a brand's responsibility. And if data unlocks that empathy, story is the way you connect to it on a personal level. And in the end, we're not going to remember brands anymore, I don't think, for their memorable advertising campaigns. We're going to remember how the brands made us feel. And storytelling makes you remember things, I think, at a rate 13 times higher than if I just present you with facts. Storytelling makes it sink in and find a place in your heart and your mind. And so I think because of its evocative nature, and because data does give us the ability to unlock empathy in all new ways, I think storytelling is about to have its day.
Wasn't it? I'm going to say a bad joke, and then you can be smart. Wasn't it Maya Angelou who said, it's not how an ad treats you, it's not what an ad says, it's how it makes you feel?
I think that was her book on advertising. Yeah.
Well, I wanted to comment on this actually related to the recession question, because I think what's such a shame about companies cutting their marketing budgets in a recession is that recession should be driven by a lack of consumer spending, right? And storytelling is what engages a consumer, and storytelling should just be getting better and more competitive and differentiating your brand in this moment. It's actually what you need the most in a recession, I think. And yeah, to Ian's point, I'm optimistic that it'll have its day because of that, because we'll start to see you really need to get aggressive about your storytelling if you want to engage consumers in this point in time.
And it's not so much, and I don't want to make this all about marketing. We're here to talk about ideas and creativity, but in a recession is actually the time you should, maybe not double your marketing spend, but you should certainly keep things the status quo, because if your competitors are spending less, it'll be less expensive for you to grab mind share, but also it's really more expensive to rebuild your brand after you've turned the faucet off, when you sort of decide to things. So I always, and people don't always take my advice, but I always say, this is the time you get more clever, get more targeted, more creative, but you still have to keep the lights on, and you still have to keep the machine going. And recessions are never a good time for anybody, but to speak completely crass, it's an opportunity. I won't bore you with all the great companies who are built in recessions and stuff like that, but just from a straight creativity, and awareness standpoint, when other people are being shy about things, it's just you can stand out and you can think. But I really think during times like this, it's when you have to be more clever and have to be smarter and things like that. So. Did you want to say something, Jesse?
Yeah, I think it's, I agree that creativity, I think, is the most important. I mean, going into COVID, a $10 million company coming out of startup, we had to dig into innovation and marketing and our storytelling more than we ever did before. And I think some of the best brands that made it out alive, dug into their marketing, and they retold their story in different ways, and they got innovative, and they kept on their creative. So for us, I think that's what kept us alive. We closed all of our locations for 11 months in Canada. It sucked. And then we reopened, telling a little bit of a different story, but I think we dug in hard to marketing to keep our community alive.
And you guys probably wouldn't have seen what Jesse's company did during COVID, but they're like a waxing, bar. You go get waxed and stuff like that. And with every location closed, I was super impressed with how you guys kept momentum going on social. Your social was above excellent and stuff. And you guys were in an incredibly hard position, but whether you called it storytelling or not, there was hints of community building. There were hints of storytelling. You went back to the brand story. You went back to, and you guys were super communicative about everything. Which ones are open? Which ones aren't open? This is the rules now. This is how we're changing things. I thought you guys did an incredible job, and it's like it's almost like a case study for someone else under what do you do under crisis marketing. All right, Jesse, since you're holding the microphone, we're going to stay with you. So you co-founded this company. You have a very, very amazing aesthetic. Whenever I do talks, and people ask me who I think some of the most interesting brands are, I always say the same two companies. I say Fashion Nova. If you guys don't know Fashion Nova, it's kind of like a women's urban clothing brand. Their clothes aren't my style, but man, are these people some of the best marketers I've ever seen in my life. You should go check out Fashion Nova. They've cracked the code. But from a brand standpoint, I always say there's a lingerie company called Negative Underwear, and I made an introduction for you to them. I just think everything they do is so beautiful and clean. They get actual customers to model in their stuff, no airbrushing, all that stuff. And their aesthetic is so beautiful. And when we met, I've known the Negative people for a long time. The aesthetic of Fuzz is very, very similar. It's not the same. You guys have your own ideas, but it's very similar. It's just clean. This is what we do, this is what we believe in, this is why we exist, and you guys did such a great job. So where did sort of the idea, not for the company, but just for the aesthetic and the brand, was that something you worked on yourself? Was there a lot of people involved? Where did that sort of come, and how has it evolved over the 10, 12 years?
Yeah, so it was definitely, I did it all by myself. I was just like, I like this. The biggest mistake I made was actually, I wanted a custom brand color. The worst marketing. Right now we have different signages and I still, there's no Pantone for it. Mm-hmm. So that was my number one. If I could go back, I would have made that a Pantone. But no, I just dug in. If anything, we wanted to be a very unisex brand right from the beginning. So we wanted to, not only attract females to a service that is waxing, that's, we're familiar with, but also attract everybody. So I was just very mindful and strategic about the colors that I was picking. We wanted to be the anti-salon concept, so we're not going to put flowers on the front reception desk. So we kept it very minimal and simplistic. That was the whole idea. As it evolved and the company grew relatively fast, we saw a success 6 months after opening, which I'm very grateful, and we kept growing. I did attempt to bring some of the bigger agencies on to help us tell our story.
You're looking at me in a very cute story right there.
Because I hated it. if I'm being honest, I feel like
work for that agency.
So I did try because, I didn't have any experience in business and I'm not an esthetician. So as I grew and as the business was evolving, I wanted to look to the experts because I thought they could add value where I just didn't understand. And I realized that no one's going to tell my story, no one's going to do it and like I do it. So I held on to that for as long as possible. And, I got into contracts with some of the biggest agencies. I walked out after spending 20 to 30K. This is not, they just kind of take you through that process that's mucky and messy. And they were getting me more confused than kind of aligning me with where I wanted to go. So it's been me from the beginning. I have a co-founder. Our roles right from the get-go, she's finance operations admin. I'm very creative marketing PR. So we were a 50-50 split. So in terms of the perfect partnership, we got that. And we just sort of fell into that. So she's always sort of valued my opinion. I value and respect hers. I'm a horrible student. I hate admin. I do the fun stuff, the marketing. And when there's no one above you, I always just had to go with my gut. Like, no one's going to tell me at the top, like, either it's wrong or right. So I had this, like, okay, my way has to be the right way because I can't look to my co-founder, understand where I'm coming from. So we've always sort of had very different opinions and I've relied on just kind of following my gut. So I know that's not, I mean, the passion is what kind of took me through it. And I've never, it's just been me. Yeah. Aesthetic and wanting to obviously be a very unisex brand. Right from the beginning, I knew that we don't just want to appeal to females, we want to appeal to everybody. Yeah.
Cool. Bill, you're unusually quiet down there. I have a question for you. When I think of creativity, a lot of people don't buy into the lone genius sort of concept, but you're a guy who does really amazing creative work, but you also kind of work without a lot of input. The last couple of years, you've been not going in the office, COVID, stuff like that. How do you think having a smaller team or no team around you affects the output of things? And is it more freeing or more restricting?
I have an answer. No, I always think, you were talking last night about, great creative ideas come from when you get all the information.
Don't ruin my keynote.
Okay, well, see, because I would like it. If I were in the when I will be in the audience for keynote, I would I object, because I honestly think sometimes the best creative ideas for me come from when I get almost no information, or I have not enough time, or we don't have any money, or and I know that's kind of but it just forces me to actually do work, because I am naturally, in terms of work, I'm naturally incredibly lazy, and I don't mean that in because I'm doing other stuff. I have other stuff that I would much rather do than my work, and so when I only have, it's this perfect example. Monday night at 11:36 p.m. This guy I work with, this creative director, says, "Hey, I need some lines of copy for a script. It's for something that Bob Odenkirk is going to read for a Better Call Saul thing." He says, they hate this line. "Can you get that to me first thing in the morning?" And this is 11, unfortunately I read that. So of course then I dream about it all night. And I wake up at 5 in the morning and I write down 7 things. And then when I get up at 6:30, I write down a few more things. And I'm I'm annoyed, I'm irritated. That's the other thing. Creative. A lot of times, my best creative moments come when I'm just annoyed as shit. Excuse my language. At the assignment, because then I'm just I don't care, and I just throw out my I don't even care what you think about these. And he's like, "This is fantastic." The ideas that I sent, and I sent them almost with a middle finger. As much as I love the guy, I did. They kind of went with a middle finger. I had no time, nothing to go on other than they don't like this line. And he's like, "Oh, this is great. This is perfect." And that's I kind of feel sometimes creativity for me comes out of man, I have 8 minutes left. I have to do this. And it's not having enough time. Yeah, again, not enough time, not enough resources. But I also think that creativity for me comes you can give me 10 days and I'll think about it the whole time, but I'm not going to do anything until probably 2 or 3 days before. And really that the huge push is going to come for me in the 2 or 3 hours before it's due. And then that's when, but I think a lot of it is that process is that you have to kick it around in your head. And it's the idea of the other night I thought about it. I got the email before I went to bed. Of course, I actually even had a dream about it. I had a dream about this stupid thing, and that I showed up at the shoot with no ideas. And then I woke up and I was like, "Oh, I got ideas." And then a lot of it is I think sleeping on it, I think thinking about it, and then just crap. It's I'm mad, I got to get this done. And that's when I get my best creative ideas come out.
We dream of very different things. Megan, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. How are you?
As the MBA, big brand, big brained person here, so you mentioned you worked at Facebook. I almost said a different company. You mentioned you worked at Facebook for 7 years, Wall Street Journal, before that Mashable. You've worked in some very, very fast-growing, fast-paced environments. where does, like, can you be creative in an environment like that? Because, like, we're friends, known each other for a long time. Obviously, we've had hundreds of conversations about both of our work experiences, so I know a lot of, like, the stuff, but, we've never actually talked about, like, what it's like to be, like, is there room for creativity in a big brand, or is it just, work, 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 work?
Yeah, well, yes, I do think there's opportunity for creativity. I just think that creativity manifests itself differently, especially, and I mean, it also depends on the role. Like a lot of the roles that I held at Facebook, I wasn't necessarily directly influencing the customer in the role that I was in. So much of my job was getting creative about how I influenced other people in the organization who might be closer to that aspect, for example. So I think it's really, yes, like there are opportunities to be creative. It's just a little bit different. I also think in terms of appeal, ultimately when you're at a bigger company, because you're appealing to a larger audience, you just have to be maybe more cautious in your messaging than you might be for a smaller brand that can, take more risks and be less worried about, frankly, just being, offensive or, I guess, alienating any particular audience segment. Because at a larger company, you, to a certain extent, have to think about everybody. But that doesn't mean that you can't do interesting things or you don't have times or certain initiatives where you're engaging, more niche communities.
So are you saying that during the Black Lives Matter movement, when Popeyes tweeted, I gotta get this right, or it could be even more offensive, they tweeted something really close to Popeyes would be nothing without black people? Is that not, big brand being creative, or is that big brand being reckless?
I mean, no, I don't think that's reckless.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So another free-for-all question. I want everyone to jump in here. Do you guys think you're creative? Like, do you identify as a creative?
I identify as a creator. I used to think I was creative, and then my wife corrected me. I'm going to point out my wife right there. We were having a conversation a few years ago, and she said, I really want to understand your creative process and how you think and how you get to ideas. And so I tried to explain to her how I do it, which to me is I'm a very logical thinker. And I like to amass as much data, as many insights as I can. I want to get inside your head. I want to know how you spend your time, how you spend your money, who you hang out with, what matters to you. And then I'm going to figure out how to help you. That's my goal. So I talk through the whole process. And I'm very proud of myself that I've been able to articulate this to my wife. And she goes, oh my God, you're not creative. That's math. And I said, oh, no. I mean, I sucked at math. That's not math. She goes, no. You take logic and then you go through these logical equations and then the most logical solution comes out. And I'm like, oh, fuck you. So there you go.
Bill, do you consider yourself creative?
I guess I'm creative enough that I've made a living for 35 years with no marketable skills at all. Really, you're talking about storytelling. You're talking that's what I do. That's just kind of always what I've done, and how even when I've been hired for jobs, and I've never been hired for a job where I think I totally know how to do that. It's usually I have no idea how I'm going to do this, and then you figure it out. And I think a lot of that, it's just I'm good at problem solving, but I'm also good at figuring out ways around obstacle, well, that's problem solving, and you figure it out, and whether it's a creative solution or a logical solution or a money solution or whatever it is, it's like I'm an English lit major. I spent most of my, college years getting high and trying to like get over a hangover, and then somehow got out of school and got a job. I got a job in TV.
Where you got to do the same thing, by the way.
Well, no, I quit. I quit all that because otherwise I would have been dead. But but I mean, basically, yeah. I mean, my entire life is like just kind of figuring out how am I going to solve this problem, and so I guess that's creative.
All right, we're going to come to Paul last, and I have a very specific reason for that. So, Megan, do you consider yourself creative?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have moments where I'm creative. I mean, I think the way I like to think about things is that every situation calls for a different action or, different approach or behavior. So I think there are a lot of situations, yes, where I'm required to be creative, and I certainly am. But as a label, I don't know if it's like the first thing I'd use to describe myself.
Yeah, I think I'm very same. I really resonate with the problem solving. I think good entrepreneurs are really, really good problem solvers. So when Saul invited me to do this, I'm like, but I'm so underqualified. What do you mean? Like, what? I didn't go to school for this. I don't know what I'm talking about. But I think I have my moments. But really digging into the problem solving, give me any area of the business, I'll do it. I just love the marketing element of it. So I lean more into that naturally. Am I a creative? I don't know, but...
Do I consider myself creative? It depends what time of the day and what week of the year. So creativity for me has a spectrum, and kind of to the points earlier on, my creativity is about solving problems as a designer. Like, we're given questions and responses and problems to solve, and it's how that the creativity for me comes in is like how we interpret those problems, and that's what's good with design and marketing. We all think about things in different ways, and that's where the creativity for me kicks in. It's like our logic and our thought process, and it goes deep into our psyche in terms of what schools you've been to, what backgrounds you've been brought up into, and that kind of all manifests into kind of the creativity that we bring to our jobs every day. But what I also consider myself to be is very lucky to get to do this, because my ideas have been listened to and resonated hopefully with people from product to kind of design. And it's the creativity comes in kind of how we answer those questions and those problems. And that's where I see myself as a creative. So it's the very tip of it. I wouldn't say I'm always creative, because there's people out there that can paint way better than I can and take psychedelics that I would never touch to kind of do things. And that's creativity for me, because it's pulling out different parts of your psyche. Well, we get to do this finite little, tiny little thing that we can kind of share with the world.
I just got a text from our lawyers, and I'd like to say that the Neat Company does not condone any drug use of any kind. So we'll just get that on video. So the reason, Paul, I wanted you to go last in there is because I want to come right back to back with a question. And and you've been awful quiet for someone as smart as you are. So we're gonna put you in the spotlight for a minute. But maybe can we get an applause for Paul, please? Just make him feel welcome to our country.
I'm British. We don't take applause too well. We go shy.
So my question is about Prince William and Meghan Markle. Just kidding. You are one of the most brilliant idea generators, product designers, and just designer in general. Like, you've shown me, like, I've seen your work. For those of you who don't know, Paul and I speak once a week, like a regular standing call where we just kind of go through our week and pick each other up and share ideas. And it's a huge support system for me. So I've seen, the light bulbs go off and stuff. But how different, how do you approach product design as opposed to graphic design? Because you do both, but they're completely different disciplines.
I think design in general is moving in a good way to kind of being all-encompassing. And I was very lucky to study under some people when doing product design back in the UK that kind of taught us empathic design, which is it's not about one thing, it's about everything. You may not be doing everything or touching everything, but you should kind of have a thought process about it. And then I've been lucky enough to join some of the teams in companies that think that way too. It's kind of like what you've been doing with your brand. It's like you're thinking about everything, so that's why it works. That's why agencies can't come in and just take a little bit of it and take it forward. It's because it's about telling that story and taking people on a journey. So that's kind of what I do. Is it's about material, it's about form, it's about function. And as learning as an industrial designer, we have one shot. We don't get to kind of do we don't get to do regression testing or anything like that. So we have to put a lot of thought into it, and that's where the empathy comes from. So my process is kind of just understanding what people want to feel, and that's part of the brand, that's part of the consumers, but that fits in with the graphics. You want to surprise and delight people, and people want to be surprised and delighted in very different ways, in very different walks of life, in very different cultures. Again, I've also been lucky enough to live in some of the most amazing cities in the world and visit them, so I get to see a lot of this, and I try and bring all of that into my work. And it's like, well, what does I try and put myself in that position? So I don't start with a design a new cup. It's design a vessel for moving hot liquids around. It's like, take away the final thing and let's start from the beginning again. And if there's a better journey and a better solution, that's great. If you get to the same solution, you know it's working, and then let's figure out how we make that ours. So there's no one right thing, but it's kind of putting yourself in that position, and it just seems to kind of come in. And I always want to think differently. I'm not sure there's a brand that uses that. But it's kind of like just literally going through that process and putting yourself into the spotlight of the brand and the consumer that you kind of want to work with. And it's one of the most funnest processes that you could do, and it's also one of the most heartbreaking processes you can do when you get to an event and somebody doesn't like it at the same time.
I have two more questions for the panel, then we'll open it up. We'll do a couple questions, a Q&A if you guys have any questions, and then we'll keep the program going. This might be a hard thing to answer, and there might not be an easy answer for anybody on the panel. I've got an
17.
answer. Pardon me?
It's 17.
Yes. I have like a couple things that I've sort of lived and died by in my career. And one of them was, and I still to this day, is like, I truly believe if you have an idea that's so good it's worth getting fired over, you should always do it. And I've always done those ideas. I've been fired once by them. But, you know, like I think that it's so important, one, for your own self-worth, but it's also like, you know, it's not always easy to sell like really unusual ideas to people. I think I started to, we had a speaker's dinner last night. I think I started to tell this story at dinner, and I got distracted by like, you know, a meatball or something. So I didn't actually finish it, but I tell the story all the time. I had a meeting with, I'm not going to name any names, but a senior person at a major brand. And I pitched what I thought was such a great idea. And the guy, this is like the most heartbreaking conversation I've ever had as a creative. This is, you know, MBA, fancy education, you know, successful gentleman. He looked me in the eyes, he says, "This is exactly what we should be doing. This is great, it's perfect, but we're not going to do it with you." And I go, "Why?" And he goes, and I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said, "I make $400,000 a year, and if I lose this job, I'll probably never find another job like this. So I'm never wrong by saying no. And I play it safe all the time. So I know this is exactly what we should be doing, but I ain't doing it." And it's such a, like, as someone who, like, every one of my ideas are my babies and stuff like that. And I used to be a much kinder and more loving and more grounded in my older age, but earlier in my career, I stood up in a meeting and accused people of killing my babies and called the company an abortion clinic. But I'm a different person now. But as a creative, it's really hard to hear that stuff because I really do fall in love with my ideas. So my question after that long rambling is, have you guys ever had an idea so great that it was worth getting fired over? And did you do anything on it? And it's okay if you haven't. It's okay if you didn't. I'm just curious if I'm alone here.
Well, go ahead, Paul.
I would say yes, and it was a fight between the marketing team and myself. The brand wanted to go one way. I'm not going to name the brand. The brand wanted to go one way, and I wanted to go the other. And I was like, I want to go this way because we're going to go up. We're not going to go down. We're not going to go to kind of like the cheaper route of things. We're going to spend more money. And everybody was like, you can't do this. I was like, I'll make it happen. And I kind of took my budget and kind of went off on my merry way. And luckily enough, like the CEO found out about it and we kind of had a discussion and he kind of blessed it, even though my boss was a CRO. And I kind of just went off for like 6 months and did this thing, delivered everything else that I did, and then kind of popped up and it was like, oh, you've been doing this? We told you not to. And I was like, well, it's finished and ready to go. How do you want to do this? So we launched the product, and luckily enough, it came off and we added 25% in revenue that year just because of this product. It didn't cannibalize anything else. So it takes chances, and I've also been in the meeting rooms with other people that have not listened to me and kind of clipped the wings at the same time, and I quit 3 weeks later, where they were just compounding and pounding and pressing down on the ideas that we were having, and they were kind of doing the definition of madness and doing the same thing over and over again. And I stood up in a meeting and I was like, why don't you just fucking fire me? And they were like, what? We can't fire you, you're doing this. Okay. And then I left. So I've experienced both ends of that spectrum in terms of like not working out to get it done and also working out and it turning out amazingly well.
Anyone else?
I couldn't ever pinpoint one idea that I decided was worth risking my job on, but I kind of feel like when you get paid to do what we do, you're always putting your job on the line. If you don't take a stand and you don't feel strongly about things and show some courage, what are you doing in a business like this? That I'm so grateful for all the people I've gotten to work with. You know who I don't love working with? Are the people who come to work every day with the prime objective being not getting fired. Those people are no damn fun. And that's what you walked into. And you're not going to do anything better for anyone by repeating what didn't get somebody else fired. I once had a client give me that as the rationale. I won't do that because my predecessor got fired for doing that. Oh, that's some very poor rationale. So, I mean, I think if you're earning your paycheck and you're getting paid to bring people ideas, you're always putting your job on the line. And I only want to work with courageous people.
Okay, I've decided that my last question isn't probably as good as what you guys will have. So let's open this up. If you guys have questions, I'll pick you first. How we'll do it, just shout it out. I'll repeat the question just so we have it in the microphone. But yeah, if you want to.
How do you look at photographers in our area? How do you deal with photographers and multimedia professionals in what you do? And how can I be a better creative person when I leave here in that area?
So the question is, how do you view professional photography? How do you use it? And how can you be better from leaving here? So I've got an answer, but you guys could go first.
My answer, honestly, anybody that I work with, and I hire editors to work with all the time, and over years, production companies, photographers. It really comes down to who do I trust? Who do I trust, and who do I know is going to do the right job? And it's always really hard to take a risk on somebody that I don't know, because I'm going to be stuck with them. Then either I'm going to come out with a product that's great because they worked out, but if it doesn't work out, so it really comes down to trust and how well do I know you, how well do I know your work, and how did I feel? Again, how did I feel when I worked with you? Did this, did this, like, do we go, yeah, this is the right thing? And often you wind up working with people who might not be the absolute best, but are the best that you want to work with.
Yeah, this might sound really selfish, but I think what creatives are so good at, the basis of what it is to me, at least, is having empathy for, your subject or who you're trying to reach. I also want empathy for me as your colleague too. I'm reminded of, I had this situation once where I was in a general management role, and in that role, you're basically kind of seeing a project from end to end, and the biggest challenge is staying high level enough to kind of have the bird's eye view, but also being able to know the details so that nothing goes off the rails. And I had a situation where I was working with, someone in a creative role in this project, and he had like a bit of information that could have really helped the project that he never shared with me. So it ended up kind of, once I found out, like weeks later through a different method, it just set things back a couple of weeks. And it was really, and he was like, oh yeah, I knew that. I could have told you that. And I was like, why didn't you? Like just little things like that where, you might assume that, somebody might know or whatever. Like, I think, yeah, I love when creatives kind of like, think of their job as more than just that and want to contribute in any way they can. Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of working with photography because obviously being a product person, I need somebody to show my images. I need somebody to tell the story of what we're doing. And at Moo, we actually, even at a very young age, we actually built an internal photography team because we knew that the product had to be told and the story of that product was through images because we weren't going to go up against some of our competitors with price because we were more expensive. So we needed to tell that story. And that's kind of stuck with me and resonated with me through all the projects I work with. But the process I find and the thing that worked really well and I've learned from my Moo days is that bringing photographers in as part of the story and part of the process, even if it's kind of at the end when you're kind of doing the polish and the bit, allows them to kind of express and understand from lighting to positioning and exactly what needs to be done because you're able to emote and have empathy for that product and that situation, whether it be a person or a fashion shoot. And one of the best photography shoots I worked with and was like, I'd never met the photographer. I knew his reputation and I drove out to Brooklyn still in the middle of a pandemic and I'm like, I'm going to meet this guy. I'm going to work in a mask all day. I'm never going to see his face. How do we do this? Like, this is like daunting because I've not been on a photography shoot in probably 3 years. And I usually employ people to do this now. And like, we got on like a house on fire because we started telling the stories. Before we spent 2 hours getting to know each other and getting to know the product. And then we kind of went at it and we built a set together and we did everything because it was a restricted shoot. And that always works for me. It's because like it's kind of bringing people on. Then it's not separated in process or team. It's part of the process and team. It just happens at different stages.
I'm going to add one thing, not to pile on too much, just because obviously I would imagine agencies are a fairly important target for you. And the best advice I could give you is it's really about that line between the head and the heart. Because you're going to have to deal with art buying or project management or whatever the more schedule and cost side of the business is, and those people need you to be really buttoned up. But at the same time, what creative leads need from you is that ability to collaborate and to see beyond the concept. We'll always shake our heads and like when we talk about hiring a director for a shoot and say, I don't want somebody who's just going to shoot the board. Anyone can shoot the board. I want somebody who's going to bring some of their own creativity, some of their problem solving, some of their vision, some of here's how I've done this with somebody else in the past. So I would say you got to check both of those boxes really consistently. And that's what creative teams are going to be looking for is keep everyone happy, like my good friend Jonathan over there in terms of cost and timing. Have that bond with the art buyer, but get in deep with the creative directors too, and make sure they understand you're not a vendor, you're a collaborator.
Thank you very much.
So I'll just, tagging on to a lot of what you guys spoke about, but also echoing what Bill said, it is so important to find people that you mesh with and work with professionals. So if you guys all look behind you, Mike, the man at the cameras there, Mike and I have been working together for 6 years, and he knows what I'm thinking at this point. So my briefs can be so, brief, literally, and he knows what I like, he knows what I want, he makes it better. He's a professional, and I've never told Mike this. We're in therapy here, but there have been times where there just hasn't been budget in the project for Mike, but I don't want to work with anyone else, so I just pay him out of my own pocket because I know that he's going to make me look exactly how I want the project to look. I know it's going to be the proper reflection of our brand. So every now and then we just take a little hit and call it an investment in future projects and stuff like that. And we recently did a project that Mike wasn't available, and I found someone else to work with. Absolute disaster. Like, the sound didn't work. It took literally just fucking days to fix the audio on this stuff, and like I would almost never work with anyone ever again, because it's just, we've developed like, you know, like we're like business partners. He knows where my brain is going, and you know, no, at this point I don't think anyone else could step in and do what he does at the same speed, because it would be like reteaching somebody, and that only comes from like we've probably worked on 100 projects in 25 different cities. I've been on more airplanes with Mike than any other person in my like whatever. So it's so important to work with professionals, and it's important to really like find the people that get you, and you know, treat them like better than anyone else. Is there any other questions? Dixie.
But what do you do when people just have this really rigid idea of this is what a promo is, you can't break out this for you?
You know, I worked in news for a long time. I worked at NBC News, and we had surprisingly little oversight, other than like legal and the ombudsperson, stuff like that. But we kind of had sort of a lot of creative leeway, and we did whatever we want. And then for the last 10 years, I've been working more in entertainment, and there are layers and layers and layers of people that get to sign off. And that's, you know, that's the unfortunate part. The other day, 3 weeks ago, I did a spot. I had to do a spot for like the most recent Star Trek movie. And I did two spots. I did one spot that was the action, stuff blowing up, Captain Kirk, all that stuff. And then I did one that hinted that there might be a relationship between Spock and Kirk. And it showed them in a very sort of intimate moment, and it was really slow, and we were dying in the edit room when we did this. I mean, we were like peeing our pants. We thought this was the funniest thing. And you know, so I sent both of them sort of up the chain. And of course, you know, they went with the action one, and the answer I got on the Captain Kirk one was no. You know, and I've gotten away with stuff close to that before, because I think I've learned, you know, it's when you're talking about like, you know, like, are you going to get fired for an idea? And, you know, most of my ideas get rejected all the time. And so I just, you know, but I keep throwing them out there. And I always kind of think at the law of averages, you know, that I will win some. But every company's conservative. Every company, it's like, oh, we don't want to offend people. We don't want to affect, you know, or offend the Star Trek fans that think that like we're saying that, you know, Kirk and Spock are hooking up. But I thought it was pretty funny. But as you know, everybody wants the same thing because it fits the format and the schedule. It fits the whatever it is. It looks exactly like what we did before. And that's, you know, you get a chance, I don't know, I'd say like, you know, 5% of the time, you get to do something that you didn't do before. 95% of what I do is what we did, exactly what we did before. But I love it when I do get that idea that's like different and interesting, and especially when then that becomes the new way we do stuff.
Jesse, my question is for you. I don't mean to brag, but I've had body hair. I'm really interested to know, like, do you use like a USP, like unique selling proposition? Do you say, here's why you should remove your body hair in my place as opposed to other places? Or do you go into more of us, you should not have body hair, solve your problem?
No, we're more of an inclusive brand in the sense that if you're going to keep your hair, that's great. But, you know, if you're going to lose your hair, come do it with us. So we celebrate all forms of hair removal, as well as if you're going to keep your body hair. That's our whole thing is inclusivity at Fuzz. We're also, we're a membership-based wax bar. So back in Canada, I know this doesn't mean much to the US folk here, but we have over 10,000 members that come to us monthly. So that was a huge, unique selling point for us. It's not about just getting a wax once. It's about coming and getting routine waxing done. So they pay every single month, prepay for their waxing. So that's kind of like another way of kind of like, that was a huge differentiator like 11 years ago. Memberships are everywhere now. They didn't exist back then.
Are you trying to get people who already wax to come to you, or are you also trying to get the non-waxers
Absolutely, yeah.
to start? So
Yeah,
what do you focus on?
So how it evolved is we started with, niche concepts were a huge hit. There was brow bars, nail bars, lash bars. There was no wax bars. So it started there. Our niche is just waxing. Since then, the brand has definitely evolved into more of a lifestyle brand. So now we're all about educating you on skin and hair health. So that was my workaround on it not just being hair removal, it's education and knowledge about taking care of your skin and taking care of your hair. In turn, you get a better waxing experience, but that's the bonus. So it's kind of talking about it from different angles. So yes, we just do hair removal, but we're so much more than that. And that's kind of how it's evolved over the years, staying innovative. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
Does anyone have any other questions? David.
Hi, everyone. Quick one for all of you. Since we're talking about creativity and inspiration, then what's one source, could be an artist, media property, whatever it is, a source of inspiration for your own creativity these days?
Me, it's not being in the same space. It's going out and doing something random that kind of makes the neurons trigger in a different way. It just makes you think completely different. You get that screen mentality and like, I'm in the same space and I'm in my house and I'm safe. Go out for a walk. You'll think of something different.
You know, similarly, I love the word sonder. And yeah, for me, like getting out there, connecting with people in any possible way. It's a reason, for example, I love walking, but I hate treadmills. I won't walk in a gym. I don't care if it's raining. I don't care if it's snowing. I'm out there because I want to see people and figure out their stories and try to connect with them and see and I can't tell you how many times a great idea comes from me just from what I imagine is going on in somebody's life that I pass in a park or on the street. Sonder is big.
Oh, me first. I think a lot of different things, but mainly, being an entrepreneur, I'm spoiled with no one ever telling me no. Like, no one's gonna tell me no. So I really lean into my team, and then mainly, obviously, my clients being in the wax bar. So pre-COVID, we were like, grow, $10 million company. I'm kind of up here. COVID happens, closed our doors, come back to ground. It's my favorite thing, being in the wax bar, talking to the clients, getting inspired by. We have members that have been with us for literally 10 years, which is incredible. So speaking with them on the ground, I will never change that as fast as we grow. They're my true inspiration, I think. That's where I get my creative. How can I better this experience for them? So every single day that's different. I go to a different location, I meet different people, I get different creative ideas. So that's how I do.
Yeah, I think to kind of bring it back to one of the original points is really other storytelling, I think really inspires me in a number of different mediums. I love to read, so I definitely get a lot of inspiration from books. And since I'm lucky enough to live here in New York City, I also go to a lot of museums and see a lot of films. And I think just definitely visual mediums are huge for me, just seeing things in a different way through somebody else's lens.
Let's do one more question because I want to give some time to do some networking and things after. Over there.
In your creative process, do you ever feel friction between the logical, project management type of side of your brain and the more fluid, intuitive, and there's friction, how do you kind of process that?
So is there any friction in the creative process between your logical side of your brain and your creative side?
I think, if you think about anything, you think about like, okay, what are the rules around this? Of course, you're going to say no, 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 no. But I always find, like, I run a lot. And so I go for a run. And, like, there's a certain point in a run where I kind of reach this place of clarity where where at least for a few minutes, I'm able to say, screw everything. And that's, I think, when my best ideas come through. And also how I can, like, figure my way out around the rules. And, like for years, I worked for years, and I said this before, I worked for years at a place where I could kind of do what I wanted. And then as soon as sort of the corporate structure changed, and then I had to ask for what I wanted, I died. And, 3 years later, I got fired. It was 3 years of being told no, 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 and becoming more and more timid. And I think you have to find those moments like where you go, okay, like, again, it's like, what do I really want to do, and how can I get that done? And then you try it, and you're all but I also think restrictions help you be creative. It's much, because then if they take this piece away, they like, hey, they just chopped off my arm. Well, I got to figure out a way to use my arm and my legs. It's sort of, in the end, you have to figure out, use what you've got, kind of push it as far as you can, and then, you can only get so far, but you get as far as you can with what you've got.
One thing I would like to add is that, I've always known project management was really important. Just, growing up as an agency person, you realize pretty quickly that excellent agencies have excellent project management 100% of the time. However, I got the role of project management wrong for a long time, and I say this as, an agency president. I used to think project management was law enforcement, and I got that wrong, because law enforcement doesn't leave a lot of room for negotiation. And to me, the most effective project management is actually process negotiation and understanding the purpose of every process, every procedure, why rules are in place, when they can bend, when they can break, when they should never bend or break. And I think the more you're able to work in partnership with people and negotiate among those common goals, the more a win it is for everybody and the less of that friction you have.
Two things from my perspective. Both of them wish that they were my ideas, but they're not. They're two very intelligent people's ideas. Going through university, as a designer, it was like, I want to do these big things, but all the things, and especially within things where you're dealing with physical items and chemistry's involved and physics is involved, you can't really change some of those things. Like gravity is always going to be gravity unless you go to the moon. So my lead tutor always taught me being a product designer is like trying to throw a tennis ball over a mountain. You're not going to do it the first time, but you're going to try, and you keep on pushing and pushing and pushing. And that's project management. It's like, what's the first stage I can get to my goal? How do I get to the top of Everest? And you have to keep on repeating that if you all believe the goal is worth getting there. And you're going to get, it's what we call MVP 1 and MVP 2 now in technology and things like that. And something I learned over the past 4 or 5 years is within project management, and a wonderful woman who was introduced into my world, a lady called Elizabeth Tallerman. She taught me this technique of like step, stretch, leap, and which is very similar to what you're thinking about. It's like, what is my end goal? Like, what do I want to be in 6, 7, 8 years? I know I'm not going to be it tomorrow, so how do we kind of get there? What's the path we lay to get there? And it kind of brings people, and again, it's that journey, it's that storytelling. That's how do we get there? But this now becomes a project management situation. So you go, okay, what's the minimum I can do to start this process? And then what's the end goal? And it's going to be organic all the time because things are going to change. We have to learn if we're on that path. But you know where you're trying to get to, but there's those little steps in between that you kind of break it down. And it brings people who have the logical side of the brain along because they get to see the perspective of every side, but it gets to keep the creative juices flowing because you're like, oh my God, we're going on this amazing journey. And it doesn't have to be logical, it can be creative at the same time, and you're bringing people through that process.
Not to talk again, but I'm gonna, I also think helping your production managers and helping your project managers, like when you know this is a layup, make them happy, do a great job, make them trust you, and then when you get the chance, that's when you break the rules. That's when you push it. Because like, if I've got great relationships with them and they know I always deliver, if I do come up with an idea that maybe doesn't fit with what they want to do, then I have a much bigger chance of getting away with it.
Yeah, something I've found that has always helped me when there's tension is just really focusing on the overarching goal, because ultimately that should be shared between both sides of the house, right? So going back to that, I've just found generally helpful for sort of dispelling any, kind of conflict and finding solutions, because it almost opens the door to, well, let's come up with creative solutions that work for both, right? Because there is creativity in both sides of it. It just manifests itself differently.
Awesome. Everybody, please give a big round of applause to our amazing panel. Bill, Ian, Paul, Jesse, Megan, thank you guys so much.